Fagan for the entirety of the defense closing. And now Mr. Abbate has an opportunity to share the state's final words. And then we'll move right into the jury charge that I need to give you. Then you'll begin your deliberations. Mr. Abbate, when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. I told you I'm going to be tired during this talk at the beginning of this trial. So I'm going to keep this brief, I'm going to keep it concise, I'm going to keep this to the point. And one thing that Ms. Fagan said at the end during her closing, and I completely agree with her.
How great you are.
Glad to. How great you are, how great you are, how great we all are. The one thing I agree with is that in this case, y'all's duty is about the evidence. And what the evidence showed over the last couple of days to prove this defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for murder. This case is about the defendant's anger. It's about the fact that he was tried, his pride got busted, and the choices he made because of his anger and his pride of being questioned. That's what this is about. And because of those two things, the choices he made was to pull the trigger at close range, one of them with the muzzle of the gun embedded in Quintavious' right chest, embedded in his chest, and pulled the trigger. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not self-defense. This defendant is attempting to use the concept of self-defense as a license to kill because somebody tried you. Because that's what he told you. That's the evidence. There's not a single piece of evidence that this defendant, that Mr. Tuitt said that he was scared, that he was in fear, that at any point he felt that he was about to receive serious bodily injury. You never heard that from this defendant. He talked to Ms. Forte, he talked to Mr. Forte, he talked to Ms. Parks. Not once did he say any of that. He said he was tried. When Ms. Forte gave him the opportunity to say it was self-defense, he said, no, I shot him 6 times. Not yes, I was scared for my life. Not yes, I was fearful that I was about to be killed or that I was about to receive serious bodily injury. Absolutely none of those things were said. Instead, he then tells Ms. Parks that Street did it. Again, not that he was in fear, not that he was scared of anything, but that somebody else did it. Then he had the opportunity after his arrest. He made the choice to speak to Detective Johnson. What didn't you hear again? I was in fear. I was scared. I was about to be killed. I was about to be injured so severely that I had to protect myself by shooting somebody 6 times, with the first one being the muzzle of the gun imprinted into the chest of Mr. Wright. That's not self-defense. That's murder. That's the facts. That's the law. That's what you heard over the last 3 or 4 days. Nothing more and nothing less. Now let's talk a little bit about the facts that we heard about, that we can all agree on. We heard that both the victim and the defendant lived at the Parkside Apartments. The victim lived in 2308 with his girlfriend, the mother of his children, Miss Raquel James. Miss Parks and the defendant lived in apartment 2103 with her older daughter. And the defendant is a convicted felon. You heard that. You saw that in State's Exhibits 140 and 141. That because this defendant is a convicted felon, that it's illegal for him to be in the possession of any firearm. That Mr. Wright and Miss Parks known each other for several years. They've known each other since grade school and got reacquainted when they both realized they lived in the same complex. That sometime during the summer of 2022, when the electricity bill wasn't paid, Miss Parks confronted the defendant about a screenshot she saw or that was shown her by Mr. Wright, a friend, that this defendant was cheating on her, that he was paying for sex. So she said something to the effect, you can't pay the electricity bill, but you can pay for sex. Something of that nature is what she described. She testified that after she said that, she knew it was clear that the defendant knew that Mr. Wright told Miss Parks that.
And then still didn't shoot for months.
August 7th of 2022, they were in and around the apartment at 2303 in the Parkside Apartments. This defendant, again, he's a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. You saw it. Ms. Jones-Connor showed you several pictures that on August 7th of 2022, this defendant was in the possession illegally because he's a convicted felon of a black handgun. And the
Hold on, didn't they not constrain it just down to a Glock? They said it was consistent with a Glock 9mm.
evidence, as it unfolded through the course of this testimony, and after you heard from Miss Abby Holman from the GBI, that it's the firearm, that black handgun, was consistent with being a Glock 9mm. How do we know that? Because all of the
Did he say consistent? That does not match what he wrote on his slide.
Miss Abby Holman from the GBI, that it's the firearm, that black handgun, was consistent with being a Glock 9mm. How do we know that? Because all of the shell casings that were tested came back to one gun. That one gun fired those shell casings. Not the pink gun, a different gun, the defendant's gun. And what Miss Holman told you is that as it relates to those 6 shell casings, that they were fired from a 9mm Glock handgun. There wasn't a list, there wasn't a long, or different options, but it was a 9mm Glock. Mr. Wright and his family were home that day on August 7th of 2022, and they, again, were living right down the hall. That Miss James left with the kids to go get her nails done around 1:24 p.m. That shortly thereafter, around 1:28 p.m., Mr. Wright, you saw in the video, he walks out of his apartment, 2308, towards the stairs. And what you saw, and what defense counsel neglects to acknowledge that you never addressed, is that Mr. Wright turns out of his apartment, he's walking down the 3rd floor breezeway towards the staircase, minding his business. He doesn't go knock on Mr. Tuitt's door. He's not screaming Mr. Tuitt's name. He doesn't kick in the door. He does nothing but continue to walk, smoking his cigarette, minding his own business. And the minute he comes in the area, as he passes the defendant's apartment, who comes out? The defendant. The defendant initiates, intercepts, starts the interaction with Mr. Wright, not Mr. Wright. And then as Mr. Wright continues to walk towards the stairs, what does the defendant do? Doesn't go back into his apartment. You never actually see him smoke a cigarette. He follows Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright begins to talk to the 2 gentlemen that are coming up the stairs. Mr. Tuitt stays there, just hanging out in the area, crowding Mr. Wright, who was just walking down the hallway, minding his own business. Again, you know that Mr. Wright wasn't going to Mr. Tuitt's apartment because he doesn't knock on the door. He doesn't even look in the direction until this defendant intercepts him as he's walking out. Who don't you see? You don't see Mr. Forte. You eventually see Mr. Forte come up the stairs after the 4 gentlemen, Mr. Wright, Mr. Tuitt, the 2 individuals, go down the back staircase. You don't see them, they're out of the camera view. And then you see Mr. Forte come up. You see Mr. Forte go into apartment 2303, get his black bag. He told you it was full of marijuana. You see him go back down the back staircase. And a few minutes later, at 1:33, you see the victim by himself walk back up. As he's walking back up towards his apartment at 2308, you see the gun. You see his pink gun holstered or placed in his waistband. And Mr. Forte told you.
Yes.
Mr. Connor talked to you a little bit about the credibility and the believability of the witnesses. What Mr. Forte said on this stand in front of each and every one of you was corroborated. And how was it corroborated? Because as Ms. Fagan pointed out, when the victim, Mr. Wright, initially is walking down the hallway, minding his own business, around 1:28 that afternoon, when he intercepts the defendant, you don't see that handgun. It's not in his waistband. It's not visible. What Mr. Forte tells you is that when he initially sees the defendant and the victim start to communicate, argue, whatever you want to call it, that's after they've gone down the stairs.
Heated
Because Mr.
debate.
Forte wasn't part of that initial interaction. He's on the 2nd floor. He's somewhere below the 3rd floor on the stairs. He tells you during that initial interaction, the defendant or the victim moves his gun from his pocket and puts it in his waistband. That's between 1:28 and 1:33. The shooting happens at 1:54, 1:55, a solid 30 minutes. But Ms. Fagan wants you to believe that Mr. Wright's the aggressor. Mr. Wright won't stop. Excuse me, she calls him Smoke. And I want you to use your common sense. I want you to think about why she keeps calling him Smoke. She keeps intending to imply something that the evidence and the facts did not show. Did not show. What did the evidence and the facts show about Mr. Wright's nickname being Smoke? Because that was his stage name. That when he rapped, he went by Smoke. That's it. No one else called him Smoke. You heard from the other witnesses. You heard from Ms. Parks. You
Wrong.
heard from Ms. James. They didn't call him Smoke. They called him Quintavious or they called him Tay. But use your common sense and reason as to why Ms. Fagan keeps repeating Smoke, Smoke, Smoke. She wants you to believe something that's not true. She wants you to believe something that the facts and the evidence did not show. There was no testimony about anything other than the fact that Smoke was his stage name.
That's not true.
About a minute later, from 1:33 to 1:34, you see Mr. Wright exit apartment 2308 and go towards the elevator, goes down the elevator. You still see the gun.
It's also
same area of his
in
waistband as
the
he
interview,
exits,
the police interview.
on the floor labeled T out that side gate. At 1:45, Mr. Wright enters the front gates of the building. 2000. You see him again as he's walking through that front gate. Gun still exactly where you saw it at 1:33. Hasn't moved. And this is minutes before, 10 minutes before the actual shooting occurs. You see him walking through the first floor. You see him go up that first floor flight of stairs on the back side of the building. And go up. And then you see him on the third floor having a conversation, an interaction, what turned out to be an argument with the defendant. But defense counsel wants you to believe that Mr. Wright went up the stairs knowing that the defendant was going to be waiting there at the stairs to then initiate or start another confrontation or conflict. There's no evidence of that. There's absolutely no evidence of that. He's using the public staircase to walk up and go to his apartment, which you saw him doing initially when he was attempting to leave, when he left his apartment at 1:28. There's absolutely no evidence, there's no testimony that he took this route in order to purposefully and coincidentally interact with this defendant. That's just not the evidence. That's what they want you to believe, but that's not the facts. Now, what we know, and as Ms. Jones-Connor talked to you about earlier, motive the state doesn't have to show you to prove, but we have the testimony of Ms. Parks that fairly recently there had been a comment about paying for sex but can't pay for bills, and then you have Mr. Forte talking about that the argument was started about Ms. Roxy or Ms. Parks, and then kind of morphed or continued into the fact that Mr. Wright disrespected this defendant. He tried him, and so he shot him out of anger. He didn't shoot him one time, he shot him 6 times. That's how you know it was out of anger. That's how you know it was due to the fact that he had been tried. The fact that he held the gun to the chest, the muzzle embedded into the chest of Mr. Wright, that tells you that there's no way that Mr. Wright clutched, brandished, pointed, touched a firearm. Because use your common sense. If Mr. Wright pulled the gun first, how does somebody get the muzzle of a gun on your chest with you not shooting one time? And you know, as defense counsel tried to imply, that some of the shell casings could have rolled or whatever it may be, and they weren't collected from the gun of Mr. Wright that was found near his body. How do you know that's not true? You know that's not true because Mr. Tuitt isn't shot. Because again, they're feet apart when Mr. Tuitt shoots Mr. Wright 6 times. How else do you know that's not true? After Mr. Wright is shot, his position, his body doesn't move before he goes down. So if he shot his gun that's not seen on the video for some odd reason, there'd be a hole in the wall near the defendant's apartment. There's no evidence of that. The holes are in the areas where this defendant pointed and shot at the victim, and they went through his body. That's what the photographs show. That's what the evidence shows. That's why they were admitted into evidence. To corroborate the fact that this defendant murdered Mr. Wright, not to waste your time, not to just for fun, to put exhibits in, but to show you all of the evidence, to show you all of the facts, to give everything to you to utilize and to use when you go back into the deliberation room. So you can make the decision that this defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I want to talk to you about some evidence. And as you've heard, the evidence is in the form of witness testimony, physical evidence, the science, which is through Dr. Abbate and Ms. Holman, and then the defendant's own actions, his admissions, and his lies. His actions before the shooting, his actions during the shooting, and his actions after the shooting. And you've heard from Mr. Forte, Mrs. Forte, and Ms. Parks, and I won't rehash or reiterate what they said, but you heard all of the information that we talked about. You tripping, he tried me as soon as the shooting had occurred. The testimony about the victim's pink firearm, when you don't see it on the video, and when you do see it on the video, corroborates what Mr. Forte says. Then you have be a closing with those technology issue. There we go. Then you have the testimony of Miss Forte that she called the police after seeing her son and who she called a CT on the news, that he came to her house. She testified that he came to her house unannounced with her son or without her son after the shooting. That was her testimony. And that's when he told her what he told her. And she said that could sound like self-defense. And his reply was, no, I shot him 6 times. And that's when, as Ms. Jones-Connor pointed out, she said, oh shit. And he left and she didn't see him again. Then you heard from Ms. Parks. And what I will highlight as it relates to Ms. Parks is, again, she said that the defendant told her street did it. We got the physical evidence. We'll start with the video surveillance, which you've seen over and over again. The video surveillance, again, corroborates Mr. Forte, corroborates the fact that the defendant is the aggressor, that the defendant is the person who initiated the contact with Mr. Wright, not the other way around, that he continued the argument because he was disrespected and he'd been tried, and that the person who introduced a firearm into the argument is the defendant, not the victim. And again, the press contact wound, and as we talked about, or we said earlier, that the video evidence corroborates the fact that the victim did not brandish, point, touch his firearm before he was shot. Here you have Mr. Wright before the shooting. 7. This is 4 minutes after.
We spelled the name right.
Mother, child. Miss James is left. You don't see a firearm in his waistband. You see him walking down the hallway.
What is this? Am I missing what this is supposed to be? What is
Looking straight
218?
And who pops out? You don't see Mr. Wright knock on his door. No testimony or evidence that Mr. Wright screaming Mr. Tuitt's name. He's just walking to the stairs. Who stays in his space? Who continues to follow him? The defendant. Again, in the picture to the right, you see the pink firearm. This is Mr. Wright coming back in his apartment at 1:33.
Oh, just show the whole plate number zoomed
Corroborates what
in.
Mr. Forte said. The gun has been moved. Then you see Mr. Wright again, and his firearm. It's a little dark, but if you watch the video, surveillance footage, still in his waistband, exactly where you see it at 1:33, and that's at 1:45 as he's entering back into the apartment complex, the front gate of building 2000. Well, you saw it in the last video, again, that this defendant is the individual who started the contact that led to what occurred on August 7th of 2022, that led to Mr. Wright being shot and killed after being shot 6 times all over his body at close range. I want you to watch Mr. Tuitt.
What?
See Mr. Tuitt's arm, his left arm, the arm that you always see the gun after the shooting, raises.
I'm sorry. Was this a fact in evidence? Kind of looks like a hand
Mr. Tuitt's
anyway.
arm, his left arm, the arm that you always see the gun after the shooting, raises up. Don't see a gun from Mr. Wright yet. What is Mr. Wright doing? He's turning to walk away. Still see that left arm bent and extended. Use your common sense, ladies and gentlemen. No gun seen from Mr. Wright. You can see his hands. Who is exhibiting the aggressive body language? Not Mr. Wright, the defendant. She wants you to not believe your own eyes. Defense counsel wants you to not believe what you can see in the video. She wants you to make up evidence.
But now he's stepping backwards. And then this is where Forte's supposed to be saying, like, bro, the cops, like, you're loud. He's turning away. If you... You
still don't see a gun from Mr. Wright.
Now, what happens after this? Think of the gas pump analogy.
Still can see Mr. Wright's hands. The defendant has pulled a firearm. The only time you see a gun come from anywhere near Mr. Wright is after this defendant has pointed a firearm at him multiple times. After this defendant pulls that firearm again. And let's think about if you're in fear, if you're scared for your life, use your common sense. I know I keep saying that, but it's an important tool. Do you run back to the person that you believe is about to seriously harm you? Do you run back to the person who you think is about to kill you? No. Your common sense says no. He ran back to where Mr. Wright lay there and took something off of his body. I can agree with Ms. Fagan. I don't know what he took. He took it and fled. He wasn't caught or arrested a month later. I have no idea. What I can tell you is that in the area of where he is found or where Mr. Wright lay is the money that was laying kind of in between his legs. I submit to you that he took some of the cash from his pocket because he had cash in his pocket. But in all candor, I have no idea what this
I think you'd
defendant
see
took
that.
from.
I know everything gets skinny and pixelated, but if someone was sloppily grabbing some cash out of a pile of cash, I feel like you'd see enough of a wad that you'd see some extra pixels
Mr.
of
Wright.
some
Why he
size.
went back over to where Mr. Wright was that he was so fearful of, other than the fact that, and you'll see in a second, he goes back there initially to shoot him in the back. And how do we know that one of the last shots is the back shot? Because you can see the position of Mr. Wright, and you heard from Dr. Abbate that it's a close range shot, which the evidence shows he shoots in the back at close range. Then the scene, I won't belabor the point, victim is found shot 6 times. Coincidentally, there's 6 shell casings found in the area of where this Mr. Wright laid, bleeding and dead. The victim's gun is found near his body, and it's determined he never once fired a shot. You saw on the video, doesn't pull that gun. And again, he's got that press contact wound, which corroborates the evidence. You heard from Detective Sidley that when the medical examiners and investigators arrived and began to process and photograph the body, that when they turned him, there was a shell casing found underneath him. That's because he was shot at close range and fell on that shell casing from that muzzle imprint embedded shot into his chest. Again, you heard from the medical examiner, Dr. Abbate. Again, 6 gunshot wounds to Mr. Wright. And Ms. Fagan is correct. I'm going to say 6 gunshot wounds over and over and over again. Why? Because that's the evidence. The evidence is that Mr. Wright was shot 6 times. And I'm saying that over and over and over again because 6 shots is not self-defense. 6 shots is overkill. 6 shots is excessive force. If you were to believe that the defendant was initially acting in self-defense, but he wasn't. He was tried and he finished the job. Again, the victim was struck multiple times throughout his torso, many of which were close range shots to the back. Is one of them. Did a close range shot to the hand. Again, the close range shots that were talked about by the medical examiner, Dr. Abbate. This is after the defendant, the victim is laying. And you can see he's laying on his stomach. This is his back. It's the left side of his back where he was shot. And lo and behold, you see him, the gun extended pretty close to the body of Mr. Wright. I submit to you, that's the shot that was fired into the back of this victim as he lay there. And that's why Dr. Abbate was able to determine that that shot was done at close range because of right there. Then
You robbed him, but left
another shot,
everything.
to the left side as he, after he's taken something from the body of Mr. Wright and is running along with Mr. Forte. And what's interesting, and I won't show on the video, but I know you all paid attention. As Mr. Forte runs, he drops 2 things. He drops something in front of and close to the door of 2303, which if you watch closely and you zoom in, you'll have that capability in the back. As you deliberate, it's a clip that Mr. Forte drops in front of the door of where CT and Ms. Parks live. And then as he continues to run, and defense counsel wanted to imply during the testimony of witnesses and during the trial, drops a lighter, that smoke, drops a lighter that's shaped like a gun. The lighter's dropped by Mr. Forte. Not smoke,
What?
but Mr. Forte. Again, trying to continuously mislead you to not have you look at the facts and the evidence that is right before.
What does
your
that
eyes, ladies and
matter?
gentlemen. And why is she doing that? Why is defense counsel trying to distract you from what the facts and the evidence is? and
But the
to
pink
provide
gun
you
is
with
there
things
either
that aren't
way.
true, that didn't happen, because she knows her client's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of every single count of the indictment. Again, you heard from Ms. Holman. I won't reiterate. Block 9mm is all you need to remember. Not the gun of Mr. Wright, not that pink 9mm gun that belonged to Miss James. Now, I want to end talking to you about the defendant's own actions and words and why that's important. I want you to focus on, again, what you did hear, what you saw, and what the actions of this defendant were, and what you didn't hear from this defendant when he had the opportunity to speak to Detective Johnson and when he spoke to others about this incident. Before, again, his actions were he was the one who initiated the contact. He was the one that followed Mr. Wright to the stairs, not the other way around. During, you saw the body language of this defendant. He was the one that second time they began to speak after Mr. Wright and Mr. Tuitt came up the stairs before the shooting. He's the one who's moving closer. He's the one waving his hands in Mr. Wright's face. He's the one that pulls the gun from his back pocket. And then his actions after. He fled the scene immediately. He never returned to his apartment. He blamed the shooting on the street when he spoke to Ms. Parks. He lied to the detectives about his role. He lied to the detectives about everything. Because he believed that because that camera above where he lived didn't work, that she was lying to him, that there was no camera footage, which is why he kept doubling down saying, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm charged. You heard that. I never saw the victim that day. The only time I saw the victim was after I opened the door from hearing shots and he lay bleeding near my apartment. That's it. Flight or fleeing, lies, and fear of accountability, which is why he lies, are not the hallmarks of self-defense, are not what is required for you to find that this defendant acted because he was so fearful that he was about to receive serious bodily injury or experience death, like Mr. Wright did.
I mean, I think this is the strongest thing that he
Exactly after
knew
the shooting.
he was carrying and shouldn't have been carrying. That doesn't weigh on me in terms of self-defense. It's, I'm stuck, I have no choice. I'm alive, but because of the law, I shouldn't have had the thing that let me stay alive.
Don't forget the weed. Evidence of the
I mean,
press
extra clip is crazy too.
His shoes are soaked in the victim's blood.
So, what does that prove that we already know that somebody got shot? It's only going to make me think about how
Again,
the deceased doesn't have blood on his shoe
shooting.
because his gun was already out, and that's why his gun's bloody.
Defense wants you to believe it was in self-defense. Ladies and gentlemen, people who act in self-defense don't
That's
leave
probably
the
what he
scene.
picked up.
People who act in self-defense, who do leave the scene, stay close by so they can get help immediately from the officers who are in the parking lot. That's what people who act in self-defense do. People who act in self-defense tell anyone that they acted in self-defense. They don't blame it on others. Remember, Miss James said, as they passed the car, I want you to pay attention to Mr. Forte as he turns and looks and points. Remember, she said that one of the males yelled that it was just fireworks that went off, corroborating the things that Miss James said and testified to each and every one of you. As they casually walked through the parking lot from building 2,000 to 1,000, knowing that the police are around. So trying not to draw attention to themselves, trying not to draw attention to the murder he just committed. So he can escape accountability for his actions. For the 6 times he pulled the trigger, leaving Mr. Wright to bleed out on the cold concrete of that 3rd floor breezeway.
It's lovely that his theme is blocking everything he's trying
As
to
they
play on the
cross,
slide.
Pierce Road, closer towards Dolly Hollow. As Mr. Forte said and corroborated him, they ended up, at that point is when they went their separate ways. Again, the defendant's own words were not that he tried to kill me, I was in fear for my life, I thought I was gonna die, he tried me, I shot him 6 times, the street did it. You heard from Mr. Forte.
I meant to go listen to that investigation tape again, but I swear he was saying that they're saying Street did it. And then started talking about what the streets were saying. I think the detective started talking about what the streets were saying. And we had this back and forth between using Street to refer to Forte and Streets talking about people out there talking about things.
Threats he received after he stopped answering the phone for this defendant. He was called a snitch.
That's how I remember
He
it.
was sent rat emojis and what he told you that meant. And all that was an attempt to intimidate Mr. Forte, to prevent him from sitting in that seat like he did the other day, to prevent him from looking each and every one of you in the eyes and telling you what he heard, what he saw, and what he remembered. And I agree with Ms. Fagan. He didn't see the video surveillance before he testified. He told you he didn't need to. He said, I was there. I was there. His memory, his observations, what he heard, what he saw that day, he clearly could never forget. And he told you nothing was going to keep him from telling you, because he wasn't going down for what he did for those 6 pulls of that trigger. Despite being threatened, despite his mother being threatened, despite being called a snitch, despite the emojis with the rats that continued after he stopped communicating with the defendant. And again, the defendant's own words to the detectives, his opportunity after he is arrested, after he has read Miranda, after he agrees to voluntarily give a statement, thinking that he could outsmart Detective Johnson, because he knew that video surveillance camera above his apartment that would have directly captured the incident, directly captured him. Putting the muzzle of that gun into Mr. Wright's chest didn't work. So we told him that he woke up, heard shots, saw the dead body, fled, doubled down, even though Detective Johnson, as she said, kept it 100 and said she had the camera footage. Again,
She didn't look at that camera footage very well.
Had a deliberation and discuss what you didn't hear. Discuss what you didn't hear makes this clear. This is not self-defense. Self-defense fails when the defendant is the aggressor of the conflict, which you saw. He initiates all of the communication with Mr. Wright. He uses excessive force. He attempts to fabricate fear in front of each and every one of you through his lies. That didn't stop when he was talking to Detective Johnson. That continued during the course of this trial. This wasn't about self-defense. This wasn't about protecting himself from being shot, killed. This was about an execution. There's no other way to put it. When you put a muzzle of a gun into someone's chest, that you then pull the trigger, and that bullet goes through the heart, the lungs, every major organ in Mr. Wright's body, that is murder. That is an execution. And he didn't stop there. He continued to pull the trigger.
Maybe.
Unjustifiably, from shot number one.
Could have been a
That's the
switch.
facts. That is the evidence, ladies and gentlemen. What the evidence is, what you didn't hear is Mr. Wright didn't threaten anyone. He engaged in an argument. Mr. Wright never brandished his firearm. How do you know that? You all have eyes. And Mr. Wright couldn't run. Mr. Wright at all times was somehow backed in at any point, at any time during that argument by Mr. Forte and the defendant. He was outnumbered. And because he didn't run, he died where he stood. This defendant fired 6 shots. Those 6 shots tell one truth.
Did he
And
just say
that's this
shit?
defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for every single count in that indictment. This defendant illegally possessed a firearm and then he used it because he was tried, because he was disrespected
Yeah.
in front of his homeboy. And Mr. Wright paid the ultimate price. Mr. Wright will never get to see his son grow up. He will never get to experience another Christmas with his family, with his mother, with his sisters, with his grandmother, because this defendant was tried. He took the life of Mr. Wright and he took the future with his family because of disrespect. Ladies and gentlemen, the only verdict that speaks the truth is that this defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And when you go back there and deliberate and discuss the evidence, and you come back out with a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you will not be telling the defendant anything he doesn't already know. How do you know that? It's because he lied. He's tried to escape accountability, and today is the day he is held accountable. He's held accountable by your guilty verdict as to each count in this indictment. Thank you.
That's how I see it, big
Thank
country.
you, Mr.
journey.
Abbate.
It was just silent after
Ladies
he
and
ended.
gentlemen, I'm going to give you the, called the jury charge or the law in just a minute. Move your arms around a bit, as I get it up on the screen.
Yeah, there were some facts not in evidence there that were presented as facts in evidence through
There it
Abbate's closing, but okay.
So a couple things
No
about what I'm
objections.
about to share with you. One, probably most important, you'll have this document with you during your deliberations. You're welcome to take notes, but I am reading more or less verbatim from this. This is the law that you have to give.